And now, welcome to the Patriot Pulse podcast.
And good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, March 11th, and this is episode 250 of the Patriot Pulse podcast, and also simulcasting to the Two Guys Drinking Coffee Facebook page. So we are still Two Guys Drinking Coffee, but we are also the Patriot Pulse podcast. Good morning, Fred. How are you today?
Doing well.
That's good. Well, we got it.
Did you hear it?
Yeah. We had I don't know where everybody is right now, but in Bradford we had some thunder bumpers this morning, so that was pretty cool. A little thunder and lightning. So we have a special guest today. He's a returning guest. We've had this gentleman on, my gosh, at least 2 or 3 times before. But it is James Roguski, and if you'll remember him, he is. As a matter of fact, we always owe him an extra special thank you because he's on the West Coast, so he's getting up and doing this at 6 o'clock in the morning, his time. But I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're going to talk about. But first, let's do a little housekeeping. Again, we do this every week. We are shadow banned. I still have people coming saying, I can't find you organic, or, it doesn't come into my feed anymore. I can't find it. I got to go search you out, so on and so forth. So if you're on Facebook, click like, share, get us out, help us get out there. We're going live on Twitter, Rumble, YouTube. Hit subscribe, whatever you can do to help us overcome the algorithms that are shadow banning us and censoring our content. Next, I want to just do a little business with America here by promoting one of the sponsors that help us keep this show on the air.
Need to get your brand noticed, remembered, and loved? At Everything Printed Promo, we turn your logo into walking, talking, shareable billboards. Whatever the occasion, we make you look amazing every time. Pens, shirts, drinkware, tech gadgets, you dream it, we print it perfectly. Visit everythingprintedpromo.com or call 888-619-9286 today. First-time customers get 15% off. Let's make your brand unforgettable.
Okay. Little self-promotion there. Anyways, our guest today, as I said, is James Roguski. James has been calling out lies and propaganda for decades. And as a matter of fact, we talked a little bit in that about shadow banning and censoring. Well, in 2022, the company that he was using to host his websites for over a decade at that point just deleted his account. And, as he says, tens of thousands of hours of work down the tubes. And they gave no reason other than the infamous violated the terms of service. So James knows firsthand about censorship. And he has talked about a variety of issues over the years. He's talked about the WHO, the UN, the jab, you name it. It's been on his radar. And what I'll tell you right now is if you want to learn more about what James is doing, he has a Substack, and basically it's just James Roguski, ROGUSKI.substack.com. And you can see all the things that he's involved in on there. And today he's going to be coming on and talking about a new topic, Project Inhumanity. So let's get James on the screen here. James, good morning.
Jim and Fred, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's always good. It's always good to have you on. You bring a wealth of information to us and to our viewers on here. So we're excited to have you on again. And like I said on the intro, we're sorry for getting you up at the crack of dawn out there, 6 o'clock.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All righty. So as we talked a little bit off camera there, you have a topic that is near and dear to your heart right now. And I mentioned that if they want to see all the rest of them, they can go to your Substack page. But tell us a little bit about Project Inhumanity, what it is, and how you got focused on that.
Well, thanks again very much. And I'm gonna throw you even another curveball, even though I'm not trying to. Okay. One of the things that I think we actually really need to talk about is the human mind and how people believe what they believe And when they are faced with evidence to the contrary, they hang on to their chosen beliefs. And so for some people who, if they've never heard about anything that we're going to be talking about today, if they have no idea this is all brand new for them, it'll be a lot easier because they'll just be hearing something and it'll most likely have a direct path in. But most people have probably formed an opinion. You've probably formed an opinion. Fred has probably formed an opinion. And I'm here to say, I'm going to give you some information that is going to directly conflict with what you currently believe. And you're going to have to look in the mirror and go, well, wait a minute. Why do I believe what I believe? Is it based on claims that have been made in the past that you accepted? Or do you actually have evidence? Okay, so the topic that we're primarily going to be talking about, the way people think about it, is, and I don't like the terms, and I'm going to talk about the language, is chemtrails. Now, my counter narrative is very, very different. There are many people. I'll give shout out to a couple of people: Renette Senham, Jim Lee, a handful of other people also have a different view than what is out there in the world. People such as Dane Wigington and others have been, presenting information about this for well over a decade. I have a completely different view, and it incorporates some of those things. I'll make a very simple statement. When you look up in the sky and you see a white streak or a white trail behind a jet aircraft, okay, that is barely 5% of the time. And the reason is what's coming out of that jet aircraft is absolutely categorically not something that is purposefully being sprayed. If you think that, you look up in the sky, oh, they're spraying today, you have fallen for a false flag. Jim and Fred, let me throw a question back at you.
Okay, I want to interject something though, but go ahead. Give me your question.
Do you know the definition of a false flag? I'll let you define it.
Well, a false flag is something that's put out there to distract you from the truth. Basically, it's a false narrative. But let me just comment just right off the bat, because I gotta get.
No, I want to hear your feedback. Absolutely.
All right. So I think there is a difference of what we see in the sky, because last couple of days, we've had beautiful weather, and my wife and I have been sitting out on our deck looking at the skies, and we see a jet go by, and it has what we would consider a normal contrail. In other words, this is a vapor trail that dissipates. I can't tell you how many yards past or how many miles past the airplane, but it quickly dissipates. And I'm not going to go into the content of everything else you can't see, but what we can see is the vapor trail off that hot engine as it's going through the cold air, but it dissipates rapidly. Now contrast that to the streak of, we'll call it smoke. We'll just call it white smoke. It's not a contrail, because what it will do, it will go across the entire, from horizon to horizon, and not only stay, but it will widen, it will dissipate, it'll spread out. That's the best way to say it. It'll spread out in the sky. And if you have a particularly bad day, you can see these things crisscrossing your sky, and they're staying there. That's all right. So I'm going to let you address that, but those are two different things, a contrail, and you can call the other thing whatever you want to call it, but they're two separate things altogether, in my opinion, and I do have evidence to support that. But go ahead.
No,
tell me what you think about that.
You've raised the question that most people have as a question. Sure. Now, I'll make a very I want to first start with what you mentioned with a false flag. You're generally correct with what you said. A false flag is a narrative designed to distract you from the truth. But there's an additional something in the false flag. It comes from people who are acting like pirates or whatever, and they're from this country or that country, but they put up a flag of a different country so that you then blame the wrong entity, the wrong country, the wrong person, the wrong group, because they're not only giving you a bit of misinformation, they're making you wish to blame. They're hoping that you blame a different party for the very thing that they are doing. And so a true false flag doesn't mean it didn't happen. Something bad usually has happened, but the narrative is designed to make you not blame the party that committed the crime or did the deed or whatever it might have been. And you're directed to go, oh, so-and-so is doing that because somebody said so-and-so is doing that, and you listened to that narrative. So keep the overall concept in mind that probably for the last decade and a half, or maybe even really if you go back far enough, 3 decades, the thing that you described that you have a question about has actually been a very sophisticated false flag. Now, I'm not laying blame. I'm not saying anybody is wrong. What I'm saying is that people may start a false flag, but then other people believe it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And if you go back in time to Pearl Harbor and Kennedy and Cuba and the Gulf of Tonkin and the Challenger and 9/11 and COVID and everything, you'll see what I'm talking about. Situations happen and people are blamed. There's an excuse. There's a reason given. Now, to directly address what you see in the sky, it's very easy. Once you see it, it's very easy to predict what you're going to see in the sky based on weather conditions. If you could imagine that every level of the sky, okay, if you have a good pair of binoculars, you can see the spray units if you wish, and they are rarely near the plane's exhaust system. Oftentimes you will see more than one of these, quote, spraying units. Tom Eddy, my phone number is 310-619-3055. My email address is james.roguski@gmail.com. Send me pictures. Happy to talk to you about it. What I know that cannot be denied, and this is the statement I was going to make a few moments ago before we started talking about your question. Whether you believe and can show that some plane is, quote unquote, spraying something, out into the sky, I don't think anybody can deny that there is an engine that is giving thrust to that aircraft and enabling it to fly through the sky. What I am talking about is every plane, every helicopter, every jet, and every rocket and every missile leaves a trail of exhaust, whether you see it or not. Now, based on weather conditions at elevation, 25,000 feet, 30,000, 35, 40, 45, whatever elevation the airplane may be flying at. Jim and Fred, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but can you agree that the temperature and the humidity at those elevations are probably different than what you're experiencing on the ground?
Not probably. They certainly are, because you have different layers of the atmosphere.
Okay. So when there's a situation where it's generally below negative 45 degrees Celsius, which is pretty darn cold. Okay. Think, I don't know, Wisconsin or something in the middle of the wintertime. And there's a situation called saturation with respect to ice. The humidity with respect to ice, as opposed to water vapor, is over 100%. that region would be called an ice supersaturated region. Now, when a jet aircraft flies through a region of the atmosphere that is very humid with respect to ice and very, very cold, it leaves evidence of the pollution that every single plane is always spewing out. Now, can I get an agreement that every plane, every helicopter, every jet, every rocket, every missile is leaving a trail of chemicals in its wake?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I will agree with that, as long as we both can agree that the two issues, the idea that they are spraying and there's, particulate coming out of a legitimate jet engine, they're not mutually exclusive.
I agree with
No,
you
we're-
100%.
Okay.
The
All right.
possibility, not possibility, the reality, you can go on the EPA website and there's thousands of weather modification programs that are documented. Okay.
Yes.
The law from 1972 says if anybody's going to be, spraying silver nitrate or something else into the clouds to try to make it rain, absolutely. Personally, I 100%, no reservations, no hesitation whatsoever. Nobody should be allowed to purposefully spray anything into the sky, whether they want to call it weather modification, geoengineering, solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening, whatever the heck you want to call it. Purposefully spraying something into the sky, in my view, should be completely illegal. What I'm talking about is the fact that every single craft that you see in the sky is spewing garbage out of its exhaust. And when the conditions are right, and the statistics are that it's about 5% of the time, the conditions at that elevation are such that Mother Nature gives you a clue, attaches some ice crystals to that pollution. And we can talk, in depth about what that pollution is. And you look up and you see it. Now, the gentleman who said, oh, you get a binocular and you can see things. What you don't tend to see is on a blue sky day, when the conditions at elevation are such that ice crystals don't form on that pollution, the planes are still flying. The pollution is still being spewed. The schedules of the airlines are, they're still going. Everybody's still going to the airport and taking off and flying wherever they may be flying. Here's where I came in and what you have had a chance to see just a little bit, because I know you only had a chance to glance at it. If you go to projectinhumanity.com, you'll see the short version of the encyclopedia that I'm about to be publishing. I have well over a dozen articles that you guys are getting a little bit early access. I'm going to be publishing these as the weeks, go forward. Here's what I did. I went looking for the evidence or the information, the documentation of just how much pollution is being spewed. There you go. Project Inhumanity, play on words. I hope people get the double entendre.
Yeah.
I went looking for, well, how much pollution comes out of the back end of the jet aircraft. Okay. When you realize that there are 100,000 flights per day around the world, if you multiply that times 365 days, there's nearly 40 million flights a year. Now I'm going to start using some numbers that are incomprehensible. Okay. Can you even begin to imagine 100 billion gallons of jet fuel?
No. When you get into those kind of numbers, I think it's hard for anybody to visualize that.
Okay. So what we're dealing with is an industry that, in my view, is benefiting from the belief that something is being sprayed so that you don't pay attention to the enormous amounts of garbage that is being spewed. every one of those planes that takes off from every airport, from the moment it cranks the engines up, just beyond the gate to the time it takes off and lands and turns them off at the next gate, are spewing such gargantuan amounts of garbage, you cannot even comprehend it. So as a general rule, the number that is used in the industry is that on a yearly basis, they combust 100 billion gallons of jet fuel. Now, that's in addition to the 200 million gallons of leaded aviation gas that are used by smaller craft, things like Cessnas and so forth.
Mhm.
That fuel is still leaded gasoline for all intents and purposes. There's millions of pounds of lead that are spewed into the sky. Now, here's where I think you maybe had a little bit of a eureka moment, because quite some time ago, when I was first looking into this, probably 2013, 2014, well over a decade ago, I realized that, now I'm going to date myself, if you think about the space shuttle, okay, it hasn't flown for quite some time, but there were numerous launches of the space shuttle. We all know about the Challenger catastrophe and Columbia and all that sort of thing. And so if you can recall, and there's pictures on Project Inhumanity.
Saw it firsthand.
There you go. It's got to be something, right? When you see that white plume going up into the sky, the middle tank is, and the rocket engines that were on the actual shuttle used a liquid fuel. And so most of what came out of that was water vapor and some other things. But the two tubes, the two booster rockets on either side, which were between 15 and 17 stories tall. So imagine a 17-story building filled with aluminum solid rocket fuel propellant, okay? That white cloud that went up into the sky was a cloud of water vapor and aluminum particulate.
Yeah.
Now, expand that to what they're doing now. They're going back to the moon, okay? That's a whole nother show, okay? They've expanded that rocket system. They call it the Space Launch System. And the rocket system is essentially the same. But, you look at the Ariane rocket from Europe, you look at the Vulcan rocket, you look at the, Russian Soyuz, not the Soyuz, but many of the other Russian rockets, China, India, all of the nations that are putting up satellites or, interplanetary probes or whatever, many of those rockets use aluminum as their fuel. Now, we could go on, and we're not going to talk about it today, but think about all of the missiles that have been launched into Ukraine and Russia. And, at the moment, everything that's going on in Israel and Iran and the Middle East and everywhere else, think about the Korean, missile launches. One of those rockets from the space shuttle, I did the math. If you took every player on every NFL team and you weighed them and you added it all up, that's about one rocket launch. It's about 500,000 pounds of aluminum. Now, here's the other thing that even blew my mind. After those rockets are launched, SpaceX, they've figured out how to save some of the rockets and they come back down and, recycle them and so forth. But there's about 15,000 satellites up in orbit, low Earth orbit right now. When they come down and they re-enter the atmosphere and they burn up, okay, well, those molecules don't just disappear, right? Whatever that satellite or rocket or whatever part it might have been, as it burns up in the atmosphere, not in the troposphere or the stratosphere or even the mesosphere, but up in the thermosphere and above, all of that particulate matter is now circling the Earth. And so you don't want to look directly at the sun because, there are people who might do that early in the morning when the sun is rising. But when the sun is in the sky, if you can position yourself so that it's maybe behind a building or below your roof line or in some way, what you will see is not blue sky. You will see all of that sunlight around the sun. There's sort of a haze. You can't really call it a cloud because on a blue sky day, it's not a cloud of water vapor. It's particulate matter that is in the atmosphere that is reflecting sunlight. Most people remember the sun being yellow, right, when they grew up and you drew pictures as a kid. But now when you look up at it, it's sort of silvery white. Now, part of that is from the exhaust that the airplanes are leaving in the stratosphere. But a good portion of that is aluminum and other metals that are in the rocket fuel on the way up and the dissolving of the spacecraft on the way in, burning up in the atmosphere. So, it's getting to be about a month ago or so, I had collected a bunch of this information. And I'm going to talk about one more thing before I tell you what I did with all of this information. Have you ever in your life experienced, this is going to sound like I'm going off on a tangent, but trust me, I'm very much on target. Have you ever smelled mothballs? Do you know what that is like?
Yeah.
Jim?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Snakes don't like them. I put them around my house.
Pardon?
Snakes don't like them. I put them around my house.
Going to have that conversation with you. I'm not sure how close to Satan you're living with all the snakes around your house, but
No, in Florida, it was really bad.
no, I hear you, and many other creatures, I'm sure. Human beings shouldn't like them either. The main ingredient, and look on the package if you have a package, is a compound called naphthalene. Okay, now naphthalene is nasty. It's a neurotoxin, causes all kinds of health problems. 2% approximately. The limit is 3%, but in general, about 2% of jet fuel is actually naphthalene. It's what is included by Mother Nature. There's all kinds of different chemicals in petroleum, but in the finished product, in jet fuel, 2% of it is naphthalene. Now, if you think of two very tight rings, okay, one ring here and one ring here, naphthalene is a bicyclic aromatic hydrocarbon.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, it's allowed to remain in the jet fuel, and it doesn't combust very thoroughly. It's the most likely thing to remain after the jet fuel is combusted to be the particulate matter that spews out the back end and attracts water vapor to leave what people call a condensation trail, which I don't like that term. I don't use the term contrail because it implies that it's only water vapor. But the water vapor has to have something to condense on. Now, Jim, to go back to the very first question, what you're observing when you see what people call, and I think incorrectly, they call a contrail, is the conditions are such that it's pretty cold up there. It's pretty moist up there. The crap is coming out of the jet engine, and the ice is attaching itself. The correct term is really being deposited. When ice attaches to particles, it's called deposition, not really condensation. But it's not so humid that keeps happening and it keeps expanding. It actually sublimes or sublimates off of the particles. Most people would say it evaporates, but that's not the right term. And then it disappears. Mm-hmm. When it's really, really humid up there and really, really cold, the process of the ice being attached to the particles continues, and you see this long spreading, it's long, and then it starts spreading into essentially a cirrus cloud. What you're dealing with there is the same pollution being sprayed in both instances. And I want to take back the word sprayed. It's not a spray in the sense that somebody is pumping out something in addition to the jet exhaust. It's being spewed into different atmospheric conditions. Now, a good chunk of that is actually naphthalene, which is a horrific neurotoxin, which then comes raining down upon us. Now, there are processes that a refinery could use, and I've actually found a refinery in Denmark that is proudly saying that they're using the process called hydrotreating to take the naphthalene and the sulfur out of the jet fuel before they put it in the jet, so that it doesn't have all that pollution to attract the water vapor to make this all happen. Well, here's the punchline for Project Inhumanity. I had collected all of the data about, well, how much particulate matter does aviation put out with 100 billion gallons of jet fuel? I'll ask you a question, and it's a rhetorical question because I had to look it up myself. Do you have any concept of what a septillion is?
Yeah,
You've heard of million, right? Million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, quintillion.
Oh my goodness.
Sextillion, septillion, right?
Yeah, I heard you talk about that on the video you did the other day. How many zeros are after that?
Take a number and put 24 zeros after it.
Okay, 24 septillion.
It's a trillion. Okay, so people have studied what comes out of jet aircraft, right? And with an Airbus engine, they found that there are approximately 100 quadrillion microparticles that come out of that engine every second. Okay, people, we're having trouble dealing with a almost $40 trillion deficit. Okay, you got to add multiply that times a trillion. Take the almost $40 trillion deficit and multiply that by about 10 trillion to get the number of particles that aviation spews into the atmosphere every year. Okay, that is one hell of a cloud seeding operation. Okay, now think about your little Cessna aircraft or whatever other aircraft with the flares on the back that they burn silver iodide or whatever other compound and go near a thunderstorm, so that they can get that to go into the updraft and cause rain to happen. Okay, I'm totally 100% absolutely opposed to anybody doing that. Don't steal somebody else's rain, for yourself and spew all this stuff into the sky. We're talking about aircraft that are spewing 350 septillion cloud seeding particles on a yearly basis. Now, that's in addition to what is coming out of the smaller aircraft with leaded gasoline, in addition to all of the rockets and missiles that are spewing aluminum, and that many of the rockets also use fuel, and they have the particulate matter and the soot and all that sort of stuff. The amount of weather modification that's happening is beyond the scope of human comprehension. Okay, now if some of that is happening in the stratosphere, okay, above the cloud layer, arguably that is stratospheric aerosol injection. Every time NASA or SpaceX or Bezos or Russia or China or India or any other nation sends up a rocket, they poke a hole in the ozone layer with the compounds that they spew, and all of the aluminum in all of that rocket fuel triggers a chemical reaction that is breaking down ozone in the stratosphere. And when the rockets and satellites and everything break up above the stratosphere, for the next several decades, that mess is going to slowly be settling down through the stratosphere, destroying the ozone layer. Now, what I did is I took all of that data, the particulate matter, the water vapor. Okay. Now, here's where the math gets crazy. I'll ask you a trick question. If you watch the video and you read the thing, you might know the answer, so that's fine. If you burned a kilogram or a pound or a gallon or whatever of jet fuel, right? Let's just say you burned 1 pound of jet fuel. How many pounds of exhaust do you think you would get?
I don't know what the ratio is. Go ahead.
Okay.
Give it.
You actually get about 4.4
Oh.
pounds of exhaust. And, you know, you look at that, you go, I mean, most people say, well, you burn a pound of something, you get a pound of exhaust, right? Maybe a little bit less. With any kind of combustion, doesn't matter if you're burning gasoline or kerosene or, you know, anything, natural gas, whatever it might be. In order for combustion to happen, that fuel is a hydrocarbon, primarily carbon and hydrogen, right? As opposed to a carbohydrate, which has oxygen, you know, as part of the molecule. When combustion happens in a jet engine, in a piston engine, you know, at your cooktop, in your gas dryer or, you know, generator or whatever, you have to suck about 3.4 times the weight of oxygen out of the atmosphere to combine with the hydrocarbon in order to make various oxides. Now, if you combine carbon and hydrogen and all of the other compounds that are in fuel, you'll get carbon dioxide. I'm not worried about carbon dioxide. It's plant food. You know, anybody talking about global warming, nice story. We're not talking about that. But a lot of carbon dioxide is created when you combust any kind of fuel. You take the carbon and the hydrocarbon plus the oxygen, you get CO2. But you also get carbon monoxide. You get dihydrogen oxide, fancy word for water vapor, okay, H2O. When you burn a gallon of jet fuel, you get 1.25 gallons of water vapor. That's the cloud that you're seeing in the sky. A jet will burn about 5 gallons a second.
Wow.
Turn that into water vapor that's surrounded and integrated with quadrillions of cloud seeds, all of the particulate matter, primarily from the naphthalene and the other aromatic compounds. You're busy making clouds. Now, if it's dry up there and it's not super duper cold, you're making potential clouds. You're putting particulate matter and extra water vapor up there to the tune of 125 billion gallons of extra water vapor in the atmosphere from jet aircraft every year. So I took all of that information, all of the nitric oxides, all of the sulfur oxides, all of the various other, you know, waste products of jet fuel combustion, took the 200 million gallons of leaded aviation gas and all of the pollution that comes from that, all of the pollution from all of the SpaceX and NASA and all the other rockets. And I woke up one morning and I said, let me mess around with ChatGPT and Google Gemini. And I told a little white lie, right? I didn't say to those platforms, take all of this data, which is pollution, and tell me what the effects of it would be. I said, if I was a geoengineer, which I don't like that term, okay, because it really should be, you know, a term that means screwing with the atmosphere, not geology and rocks and stuff. But I said, if I was to be a geoengineer and I wanted on a yearly basis to spray 350 septillion microparticles of soot and 125 billion gallons of water and, you know, hundreds of millions of pounds of aluminum and sulfur and nitrogen and naphthalene and all this other stuff. if I wanted to do a geoengineering project utilizing the spraying of that into the atmosphere, what would happen? Okay. Well, the reality is it's a freaking catastrophe. You've got the biggest weather modification, geoengineering, pollution project that humanity is in the middle of. And because of the false flag operation saying, don't say it's coming from the jet fuel, don't say it's coming from the rockets and the missiles and the airplanes and the aviation gas. It's not that, it's the government, right? Well, government's involved, and I am categorically agreeing with your point at the very beginning, Jim. What I'm talking about is in addition to whatever covert, nefarious spraying operations there might be going on around the world. I'm not denying any of that. What I'm saying is that focus on those things is diverting people's attention away from the elephant, in the sky, which is the pollution coming from not just jet aircraft, but also smaller engine aircraft. Here in LA, we got helicopters going over our head all the time. But don't forget about the aluminum in the solid fuel rockets and all of the more normal pollution from the kerosene in the SpaceX and all these other rockets. When you add that up, the numbers are so gargantuan. Okay. You realize it's not being sprayed on us, it's being spewed on us.
Well, let me ask you this, James, because we're getting about 9:43, and I mean, there has to be a purpose for you bringing all this to light. I mean, it's not like we're going to go back to horse and buggy. We're not going to create electric rockets or electric plane, jet planes that can ferry 300 people from LA to Paris. Nobody's going to give up their air travel. They're not going to give up their cars. So what is, I guess what I'm looking at, and I go back to this Clean Air Act that you put on your Substack page on that, the Project in Humanity. We tackle things that we can do something about. So in other words, all right, we're agreeing that they're not mutually exclusive. We can tackle the idea that we're not going to allow agencies, whoever they are, to spew any more of these chemicals intentionally into the sky. So that's one part. But now what you're talking about here, and I don't argue your point at all on any of this.
Right. And neither do I argue yours.
Yeah. So what can be done about that? I mean, what is the solution to the problem that 800-pound elephant in the room that you're talking about? What is the solution?
That's a small elephant. Yeah, that's a small elephant.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of interesting that you were saying about the space shuttle, because I grew up like 35 miles from the Kennedy Space Center. So I saw tons of shuttle launching and all that crap coming out of the back, like you're saying. But we also, every year, this time of year in Florida, I don't know if it still is, I ain't been there in 10 years, but they skyride all the time. Is that the same crap that they're doing?
Different compounds, but again, is that okay? Right?
They would like marry me or something stupid like advertisement for a business, stuff like that. You see that constantly in Florida.
Okay, and so so now you're thinking, right? Now you're looking at well, wait a minute, what the heck is that, right? So Jim, to answer your question very directly, okay, there are processes. The main one that I think is a good option, and it's not just me. There are groups around the world who are aware of this, and there's actually at least one refinery in Denmark that's already doing this. They just run the petroleum product through a couple of additional steps in the refining process. Might cost a couple of % more per gallon to take out the naphthalene, to take out the sulfur, which would reduce the pollution. It's not an answer, but it's a step in the right direction. It would dramatically reduce some of the pollution. Okay. But my core point is that, and if you go back to the concept of a false flag, there's a problem, and somebody is saying the problem is that, and everybody is looking at that, whatever that might be. So and so did it, right? You know, so and so did this shooting, or so and so did this catastrophic something, whatever it might be. And the perpetrator gets away with the crime because somebody said, "Oh, no, don't look over there. Don't look at the crap coming out of the jet aircraft." Well, cui bono, who benefits, right? Who benefits from people not looking at the real problem? Well, the airline industry. They don't want to pay a couple of % more for cleaned up jet fuel.
Exactly.
Until somebody's going to make them do it. Okay. Elon wants to just shoot rocket after rocket after. There is zero, absolute, maybe I shouldn't use that symbol. There is zero regulation on the pollution being caused in the rocketry industry. Zero, right? Any rocket that uses aluminum as a propellant, no regulations whatsoever. Go ahead, spew a couple of 100 million pounds of aluminum into the sky, and then point at a nozzle on an airplane that is a pylon drain that makes it so that if there's any leakage of fuel in the wing of the craft, it leaks out and they can see that there's a leak. Those are not spray nozzles, right? If you point to something and you get people to believe that that's where the problem is, then people don't even look at the problem. How many rockets has SpaceX and Elon Musk put up? How many are they planning on putting up? How much regulation is there? How much awareness is there of the damage that these people are actually doing? Now, are we going to stop them? I'm not a government regulation kind of guy, but if you're not aware of the actual problem, you'll never fix it. My question for James would be about the length of time those streaking looking skies seem to hang around longer, because most contrails, if you wish, are short-lived. Very good question. Same Tom. Tom, give me a call sometime, 310-619-3055. You can go on a website called windy.com, WINDY.com. You can click, you have to start an account. You get a free account, takes you a minute to set it up. You don't need to pay for their premium account. You click on their plugin menu, and you can click on their Contrail Finder. And then they have a map of the world, and you can click on the map, and it will give you the meteorological data, and it'll show you, if you want to just pick over your head, are there conditions that are conducive to short trails, medium trails, long trails, spreading trails, or, every now and then, no trails are going to form because it's simply not cold and humid enough at elevation above wherever you live. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago now with my girlfriend. We try to go out at least once a day, go take a walk around the neighborhood. And we sat in this very nice grassy area. There's a fountain and a bench. And we live pretty close to Burbank Airport. I live in Glendale. And, planes are taking off, regular. And you could see them coming across the sky, leaving a white trail behind them. And we watched this one plane just go all the way across the sky, leaving a trail the whole time. Okay. Now I know that every plane, whether you see a trail after it or not, is leaving a trail of chemicals, a trail of exhaust. If the conditions are such that ice sticks to it, Mother Nature's giving you a clue. Hey, there's pollution up there. Look at it spread. Well, this one was really interesting because it went all the way across from horizon to horizon. We watched it make a trail the whole time. And then when we came back to look, at the sky that it had just gone through, the first part of it, as it was, going up in altitude, we could still see the trail, but then it stopped, and then it was blue sky again. And way, way, way off in the distance, it was making a little temporary trail, and it was disappearing. We saw the trail go across, but then it disappeared because the conditions shift in elevation. And as that plane is going up on its incline, it went into a different layer of the strata in the atmosphere. It was enough to temporarily have ice attached to all that pollution. You could see it. But then I don't like to use the term evaporated because the proper word is it sublimated. Okay, the ice came off. It didn't become water vapor. It became ice crystals, and it just spreads out. But the pollution that came out of that jet engine is there even when you cannot see it. So I've learned after a decade or so of understanding this, when I see an internal combustion vehicle drive down the street, right? Not an EV, they have their own problems. A car, a truck, a bus, whatever it might be, even if it's a delivery truck that's a natural gas vehicle, okay? Just because you don't see the pollution coming out of that exhaust pipe, there's still a trail of chemicals going behind that vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay? And when you can see in your mind's eye that every plane, every helicopter, every jet, every rocket, every missile is leaving a trail of crap behind it, and Mother Nature sticks ice on it 5% of the time, depending upon conditions, you realize that the problem that you thought was bad, because you see lines in the sky, 95% of those lines you don't see.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get people to, I'm trying to get people to see.
When you start your car when it's cold, you see the white stuff coming out of the back. But when when it's warm weather and you start your car, you see nothing coming out of the back.
Right. Exactly. And so
right.
I'm absolutely, saying there should be no weather modification. There should be no I hate the term geoengineering, but there should be no stratospheric aerosol injection of sulfur dioxide or whatever other chemical they want. Tom, I keep myself busy, James, and you live in California and I in Pennsylvania. So what is the best time to call you? Well, I'm up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So just call. I got my phone turned off right now, Tom. When we're done here, I'll turn my phone on and give me a call. Love to talk to you. Go to projectinhumanity.com. Way too much information. I get it. Okay. But if you can see in your mind's eye what Fred just clearly demonstrated that you're able to see, right? In your mind's eye, you wouldn't go into your garage, turn on your car, close the garage door, and spend the day working in the garage, okay? You don't have to see garbage coming out of the exhaust in your car to know that there's garbage coming out of the exhaust in your car, okay? Mm-hmm. And so what has happened is, quite frankly, a massive false flag counter narrative, counter to the truth. If anybody says, oh, don't worry about, jet engine exhaust, they are spraying something. Well, maybe they are. Take a picture, get some evidence, send it to me. I'd love to know about it, okay? But even if there is an aircraft that is doing weather modification, or there's some aircraft doing geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol injection, that craft still has an engine to propel it to perform that spraying. If you're pointing to the concept of spraying, you're not paying attention to the spewing that is going on in such a gargantuan amount with things like naphthalene, which is a neurotoxin, which makes up 2% of the fuel. What they don't want you to know is that they could keep that jet fuel in the refinery a little bit longer, do a couple of relatively inexpensive processes, take those metals and sulfur and aromatic hydrocarbons out of the jet fuel to make less pollution, because it would make the fuel cost a little more. You might pay a couple of bucks extra on your airline ticket, but they don't want to do it. And here's where it really gets complicated. And I know we only have 2 minutes, okay? The EPA has the authority to do it. But as you know, Jim, I reported on the WHO, okay, and the international organizations. The problem is the EPA and the FAA are pretty much incapable of thinking and acting in your best interest. They follow the international guidelines of a number of international associations. And until those associations address this problem, okay, you're going to keep seeing white lines in the sky, regardless of whether or not laws, ban geoengineering or weather modification, because you're not being sprayed, you're being spewed by pollution that they could make better. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to make it go away, and we're a decade or more away from any kind of electric airplanes and that sort of stuff. They could make the problem better. But when people are pointing to a distraction and they're not addressing the actual problem, if you've fallen for a very sophisticated false flag diversionary tactic with your mind, if you can challenge your assumptions and go, oh, wait a minute, yeah, there's an engine on every airplane and it's spewing garbage. What about that?
Yeah.
If you think on that, then you'll be thinking about the actual problem.
True.
Let me cap this off by the agreement that we made at the beginning, that they're not mutually exclusive. The HR 7452, the Air Quality Act, which is currently in, I think, 3 different committees in Congress right now, will attack the idea, and it is not just a theory, it is proven that there are companies that are intentionally injecting chemicals into the atmosphere for whatever the reason, whether it's
weather modification and geoengineering.
Weather modification. All right. So we tackle that. I'm going to suggest anybody that wants more information, go to James's Substack or go to projectinhumanity.com and get more information there, because I agree with that, that's another part of the problem. And James, I think you'll agree, that's probably a harder problem to tackle, because, we can make laws that say you can't put these other airplanes in the sky and intentionally do weather modification. I mean, that's been going on since Vietnam and before. We can make those laws,
and we absolutely should, positively.
Yeah, but it's going to be a much harder row to hoe to get the other part, but it doesn't mean we don't try. Okay.
Exactly.
I'm just gonna. It's 9:59. I know I'm gonna lose our Bradford TV on OBBMnetwork.tv in a minute, so I'll say goodbye to that crowd. We can carry on for a couple minutes past 10 to wrap this up. But any final thoughts? Give me an action item. What do you want people to do as a result of our conversation today, James?
Challenge your assumptions and realize that there is an active confusion and a distraction. I believe it's really a false flag operation to get people to not pay attention to the problem and to blame the problem on something that is important, but in the grand scheme of things, not as big as this gargantuan problem that, quite frankly, we are all part of. I've flown on an airplane. I've watched the space shuttle go up on television. We have to understand what the problem actually is if we want to have any hope of actually addressing it. So when you look at Tennessee and Florida, banning geoengineering, and you still got white lines in the sky, that should be your clue that that's not really what the problem is. And hopefully people will address the actual problem.
Yeah. Well, we got people on here saying we want to get you back, James. So yeah, right. It's a great show. We want to get you back. I can see why your other video I was watching went 3 hours long. I was
Easy.
watching it at double speed and still didn't get through the whole thing.
And
But-
that was the condensed version of a couple.
Yeah. All right.
Happy
so-
to have this conversation anytime, anywhere with anybody. I'm as open as I can possibly be if somebody wants to call. But dig into the information and realize that that is the short summary version of an encyclopedia of documentation that I'll be publishing over the next couple of weeks.
Well, again, I encourage everybody to go to your Substack, follow, and I'll put this up here again just at the last minute here. If anybody wants to contact James, as a matter of fact, that's how I found James a couple years ago now or more. He just happened to put his phone number out there on a podcast I was watching, and I did the same thing. I called him up. So he invites you to do that. James, thank you so much for being with us today. And we will stay in touch, and we'll get you back on the show. And
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Fred. And I appreciate it. People can send me a text message. that usually works for a lot of people.
Okay.
But yeah, happy to have this conversation going forward. Thank you.
great. And Fred, James, we always close our podcast with a word of prayer. And Fred is our prayer warrior. Fred, I'll ask you to pray us out of here, and then we'll say goodbye to everybody. Go ahead, Fred.
All right. Thank you, Lord, for this day. Lord, I ask you that you would put a hedge of protection around Jim and all the truth seekers out there that the enemy wants to silence. Lord, I ask you to give us understanding, give us wisdom, give us a plan that we can find the truth behind what they're trying to do to take out the truth, Lord. We want your guidance. We want your wisdom. We want your understanding, Lord. And bless everyone that's listening today. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right. Hey, everybody, wherever you are, whether it's raining like it is or you're sunny and 70, like probably James is going to have today, we want you to be blessed
And be a blessing to others.
All right. Have